might as well say a little something about the Jokhang, because once we get there, today I believe is the first day of Sagadawa, I think. In the Tibetan calendar, today is the first lunar day, although it's the 20th of the 5th English month, but or Roman month, but it's the first day, so there will be a lot of Tibetan pilgrims there, no doubt. And it'll be a real mob, and we'll get a sense of Tibetan piety and fervor. Jokhang is like the Mecca of Tibet. So we won't have much chance, it's not right, it won't be a proper place really to do art history lecture, or we won't have... However, at the end of the trip, if the weather has cleared, I will go to my favorite place in Lhasa, or one of them, which is the roof of the Jokhang, which is a place where Tsongkhapa in the 1390s had a vision, his first vision of Manjushri, the Bodhisattva of wisdom, and he received some teachings there that we've been using actually on the first trip and we will use on the second trip. Some meditative teachings, because in these trips we're doing a double pilgrimage. We do the exterior pilgrimage to the exterior sites that are sacred to the Tibetans, and actually in the case of Kailash to the whole world, and of Asia at least, and I think now becoming more and more the West too. And we do an interior pilgrimage to sort of try to wander through the heart of the Tibetan Dharma, and with the path of meditation, the Bodhisattva vow of love and compassion, and the teaching of wisdom, of selflessness, and renunciation, and so forth. And we contemplate such wonderful topics as the preciousness of human life and the immediacy of death. Being a busy Buddhaholic, as my children call me, and overworking all the time, I hardly ever meditate except when I'm helping somebody else meditate. So then by doing that, I get to meditate a little bit, which is very nice, very good for me. So now, what about the Jokhang? Why is the Jokhang such a big thing in Tibet? The Jokhang is, the Jo Rinpoche is a statue of Shakyamuni Buddha, and it was purportedly made, it's the size of an 8-year-old boy, and but it is the Shakyamuni as a monk, as an enlightened person. It's not the Prince Siddhartha. Someone mentioned it was the young prince, but it isn't. Although it's the size of a young prince, it actually is Shakyamuni Buddha, the enlightened Buddha. And it was supposed to have been made from the actual Buddha, according to the Tibetan myth, although Westerners don't think there were any statues made in Buddha's time. But there are stories in the Buddhist literature of things being made in Buddha's time. For example, there's a famous story that I like of King Bimbisara, one of Buddha's great supporters, who wanted to send a painting of the Buddha to a neighboring king who was too far away and had never met the Buddha. And somehow he didn't think it was, I think it was a Persian king or up in Afghanistan. So he told some painters to go and sit, and he asked Buddha to sit for the painters, and the Buddha agreed, so that he could send this to this neighboring king, just so he would have a picture of the Buddha. And the painters went to try to paint the Buddha, but they couldn't paint the Buddha, because the Buddha was like, I always like to say he was like Mr. Spock, Dr. Spock, or not Dr. Spock, Mr. Spock, in the transporter room when he's being beamed out. Just as he's about to beam out and his outline is all filled with sparkles, and you can't quite look at him. You can't quite see what he looks like because he's sparkling. So Buddha was a being like that. He looked all like different things to different people. He was always like looking like transparent and shining. So the painters were very frustrated. They complained after several days trying to paint the Buddha, and it was like his image kept like moving, like morphing. You know? Or like that Michael Jackson video where he turns into all different kinds of things. You know? So then the Buddha said, well, okay, to help you guys out, I have a plan. And then he went and he sat on the edge of a pool, a tank, what they called in ancient India, like a swimming pool. But it was a clear, still tank. And he sat on the edge, and the painters looked at the reflection in the water. And by looking at the reflection in the water, that stabilized the coruscation, the rippling energy of the Buddha's form. And they were able to paint the Buddha. So anyway, this was a statue made at that time. And it was then it had come into the possession of the king of China, the emperor of China, the Tang emperor. And then the first Dharma king of Tibet, what they considered, Somzen Gampo was his name, who lived in the early 7th century. He knew about that statue, that it existed in Tang, China. So he sent his minister down to the Tang emperor, and this would surprise people nowadays who look at the relative size and strength of China and Tibet. And but at that time, he sent his minister saying, send me one of your most beautiful princesses and the statue, or else. And he was not yet a Buddhist, you know, so they were still scared of him. And but then the king made his minister go through many tricky things. There's some wonderful tales about puzzles and riddles and many things that the minister's name was Lumbu Gar, and he had to solve all these riddles, like he had to put a thread through a giant turquoise that had a weird hole drilled in it that went all around corners. He had to somehow thread through that. And it was competing with the Prince of Korea and Mongolia to get this princess, how to get the thread through the stone. And how did he do it? He took an ant and tied it to the leg of the ant, and then he dripped honey through the stone. And then he had the ant follow the honey through the stone, to the thread. Anyway, the princess came up, and she was a master of feng shui, of geomancy. Her name was Kongzhou, the Chinese call her Kongzhou. And she was very unhappy going to Tibet. She said, really, why I live in beautiful China, in the Tang Dynasty capital in Xi'an, and Chang'an, I think it was called in those days, and I don't want to go to this horrible, grisly, dark place where there are a bunch of warriors and imperialists, and they're just really grisly, and I don't know what's going to happen to me. And she sang many laments. But anyway, she said, well, I guess I have to civilize these people. So she brought many Chinese sciences of geomancy and other things, and she brought this statue, which they had to drag along on the roads. But she finally got the statue to Lhasa. And then she did geomancy, and there was a lake in the middle of Lhasa. And this lake, she said, was the heart of the sort of goddess that was Tibet, that was the Himalayas. The Himalayas, she had a vision of the Himalayas as a giant goddess lying on her back. And she was a somewhat fierce goddess, like an ogress, very ferocious. Because Tibet was known for the land being the land of strong women, sort of like California, I guess. Because the deity was this tremendous ogress. But the heart of the ogress was this lake. And so they filled in the lake, actually, and covered it over. And she said they would build the temple and put the statue there. The Chinese princess's statue ended up at the Jokhang. Of course, it was smashed and shattered during the 60s Cultural Revolution, and before the Cultural Revolution, during the uprising. But some pieces were saved and recovered, and then it was put back together. It's supposed to be the heart of Tibet. And then that Sonzen Gampo built a network of 32 temples, I think, around, going all the way out as far as there are 2 in Bhutan, which we were nearby, but we didn't get a chance to go there. But anyway, there are 2 there that are still supposed to be from that system. And then they're all around in Tibet. And these 32 temples are on the different points on the body, geometrically, or feng shui-wise, of the goddess. And they had to do with the goddesses accepting the Dharma, actually, Buddhism, and shifting over from the older shamanic worldview and the tribal worldview of the Tibetans to the Buddhist worldview, which took centuries. And actually, it's very amazing, from that time, that was around 640, 630 of the Common Era, and 1,000 years later, in 642, the 5th Dalai Lama was given the control of Tibet by various circumstances, and the Tibetan warlords, the aristocratic fighters, the last remnant, you could say, of Tibetan imperialist social sort of energy, fit itself into this sort of more Dharma government and Dharma society. And then the Jokhang was built at that time. Although Sonzen Gampo had also had a palace. At that time, there had been a retreat palace of Sonzen Gampo. And the Jokhang, therefore, is this original place. And the thing about the Buddhists, when they would go somewhere, like in Tibet or someplace, they would never destroy or try to deny or negate the existence of the earlier sort of shamanic or tribal deities. They would change their cult from a more bloodthirsty kind of blood sacrifice type cult that those older things had, sacrificing animals, and unfortunately in imperialist times even prisoners, people, as all ancient tribes were like that. But they would change that. The poor ancient tribal gods would become vegetarians, even though the Tibetans weren't completely, but they would become more gentle anyway, and they would stop their warfare. And it took that 1,000 years from the time of Sonzen Gampo and the founding of the Jokhang to the 5th Dalai Lama and the founding of the Potala. And in that 1,000 years, the Tibetan nation, as a nation, you could say, demilitarized, unilaterally disarmed in a certain way within the context of Asian politics and Asian society. And similarly, on the way to that changeover, of that 1,000-year changeover, in 1409, Tsongkhapa, who was a great Lama who had just coming off at that time, he had had a 7-year retreat in a part of Tibet near the Lama Latsa, where we're not going, not far from here, in the 1390s. And then in the early 1400s, he was giving teachings widely in Tibet, and Tibet was going through a real millennial kind of event. And in 1409, he founded what's called the Great Prayer Festival, the Malam Chemo, which is every Tibetan New Year here in Lhasa, and it celebrates the time when the Shakyamuni Buddha sort of showed a sort of triumph in India. All the kings of India came. I mean, it's a Mahayana Buddhist legend. They have a version of it actually in Theravada as well. And it was sort of a time when Buddha kind of openly manifested. From the Buddha's heart came a light, and then there were two Buddhas like this. And then from the heart of those Buddhas came a light, and then there were two Buddhas, and then two Buddhas. And he kept multiplying himself like that. And finally, he was perceived by everyone present. A little golden Shakyamuni was perceived as being present in every single atom. In every single, like on the tip of everyone's nose, like there was like seething with Shakyamuni Buddhas, every atom in the universe. And they were having a cosmic vision of the galaxies, and there were little Shakyamuni Buddhas everywhere, on every atom. And to swarm of Shakyamuni Buddhas, they say in Tibetan, like a sack full of sesame seeds, just completely crammed with Shakyamuni Buddha. And so then he looked at his father, he said, "Dad, I didn't conquer the world in a political way, with armies, and with Donald Rumsfeld, I mean with equivalent. I didn't do that, but I seem to be everywhere anyway, don't you think? Do you think that's good enough, Dad?" So then the father said, "Well, I guess you're everywhere, I guess it'll be okay." Father was mollified. So in those 2 weeks, he celebrated by having this huge party here in Lhasa for 2 weeks. And then the monks came to Lhasa, and the sheriff of Lhasa, the local lords, who still existed at that time, they gave the keys of the city. The monk police became the city police. The streets were stopped, all traffic. Everybody was praying in every street. And it is said that every citizen of Lhasa and of all the surrounding environs who came from all over Tibet saw in the sky all day long, all the time, those kind of refuge fields that we've been meditating, where you visualize all the enlightened beings in the sky above you. And everyone saw that the whole time, like you didn't have to be a psychic or a specialist. It was like up there all the time. And there were butter candles all in the street everywhere, so it was like there was no nighttime. And it was a really awesome time for the Tibetans. And actually it's said that, the Tibetans have those giant tankas that they release from the top of mountains or the side of huge monasteries that are huge like that. Those tankas started to be made after that time because the Tibetans had a memory of these special times when sort of the heavens seemed to open and all the enlightened beings seemed to be present instead of, usually we think Shakyamuni Buddha somewhere passed in history and he passed away, Jesus is gone, except when Mel Gibson takes the whole of it. It's sort of, we have our own worldview and world picture, and we sort of think here we are, and we're all in a later time, and it's a bad time, there's not so many good people around. But then there are these moments where what I call millennial consciousness arises, not apocalyptic consciousness where you have to have a big thing where everybody gets killed first, but millennial consciousness where the millennium is actually here, and everything is perfect, actually, if you had the wisdom to see it. And therefore the pressure is on you to change your heart and your mind and your perception to see the perfection. You follow me? It's a different view. Normally we have this view that everything's very imperfect. Buddha came and left. Jesus is gone. He's coming sometime back, or Moses or whatever, or the temple will be built sometime. Each culture has its own millennial idea. But they're deferring how they're going to be the sinner and the imperfect and the suffering and making the best of it. Until some other future potential time.